At the earlier service today, we were gathered in the chapel, and this was maybe 20 minutes before the service was to start. And on Christmas, there's often folks whom we don't know who are hanging around. And there was someone who come to visit and celebrate and worship with us. And there was someone with us in the chapel whom we had not met before. And I had a brief conversation with him. And as time passed on, he drifted off to sleep, and which is a thing that's allowed. I've probably slept in church more than once myself, but as I periodically checked in on him, and he looked to be at an increasingly uncomfortable angle. I don't know how else to put that. Time passed, and he was increasingly listing over to one side, and Christy in the choir went and spoke to him and said, and we checked back, and she said, I think we should call 911. It turned out she was unable to rouse him, and so it came to be that on Christmas Eve, we ended up doing CPR on someone who we'd not met before. The paramedics were here very quickly, and it looked like they were able to revive him using Narcan, so probably an overdose. And so we can hope that he's doing okay now. We're not totally. Some folks had the sense his name was Derek. Some folks had the sense his name was Richard, or perhaps Derek. If you're inclined to spare a prayer for someone whom you haven't met, what a hard day for him. One of the people who helped us do CPR while we were waiting for the paramedics to come was there. He brought his elderly father to church, and because the service hadn't started just yet, they were waiting out in the parking lot in their car, and their plan was to wait until the service began, which, as I said, would have been about 20 minutes. But he said around this time, something told him, why don't you go inside? And so he left his dad and his stepmom in the car, and in he went. And there he was to help with, to perhaps save this man's life. There's a conversion story, right? That what is happening in our lives when a whisper like that shows up and that calls us into action. So after the ambulance pulled away, I realized that I wanted to talk to you about a totally different thing tonight than that I'd been planning on. So here we go. This afternoon was my second ever time that I have witnessed or participated in cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and I was reflecting on both of my own experiences and on that very public experience of CPR from when 2 or 3 years ago at the Buffalo Bills game, when Damar Hamlin, the name of the football player who went into cardiac arrest on the field, and the game stopped. They were able to resuscitate him, and he's not only has his life gone on, but he's continues to play football. Everyone agreed. It was such a distressing thing to watch that the players in both teams and the referees and the spectators and everyone at home realized that it was reasonable to stop the game. And afterwards, I saw an interview with an emergency department nurse who said, could I just invite you to notice that there was universal agreement that after witnessing CPR, you can't possibly continue work. And she said here in the ED, we not only witnessed CPR, but it participated in CPR multiple times in a shift, and no one says, you get to go home now. there's very much this expectation that we have to continue. I've thought about that often. So here, inspired, is that the word? That feels like an inappropriate word, but sparked by this experience today is the other time that I witnessed CPR. Some of you may have heard this story before. If you have, bear with me. It's the story I want to tell tonight. I don't remember the first time when I met many people, but I remember the first time that I met Doug McKinnon. I was a young stagehand. I just graduated from the theater department at the University of British Columbia, and it's safe to say that there was no one like Doug in UBC's Ivory Tower. We were both working together on the Arts Club theater stage in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I didn't see Doug coming so much as I heard him. I was to learn soon that it was a rare time when Doug wasn't talking. He had many emphatic opinions. On that day when I first met him, we ended up working together in some project, who knows what it was, putting lights and pipes or dismantling something or erecting a set. And Doug started telling me the story of his life and sharing that his girlfriend had just left him and taken his pager. The pager tells you what era that was. This would have been in the 1990s. So we're well on our way to a country music song. Not only your best girl, but your pager is gone. And Doug told me of his love and his grief in the most startlingly foul-mouthed language I have ever heard. He was this poet in profanity. And in the coming years, we would work together a number of times. We would see one another on rock shows or theater shows or dance shows or who knows what. And sometimes, this is the nature of working backstage, sometimes weeks or months would go without us seeing each other, and sometimes we would see each other for long days over the course of a week. I didn't see him on a really regular basis until I started working at the Vancouver East Cultural Centre, and we needed to hire an audio tech. We had just fired our audio engineer because he was constantly insulting the clients, and it turns out that's a thing you shouldn't do in the theater business or any business. That's contraindicated. And Doug had just been fired from the theater where he worked, and so we hired Doug from the theater. Him and the other theater hired the person whom we had fired, and it turned out that we both actually ended up really happy with this trade. By all accounts, Steve at the new place did great, and we really loved Doug. And I don't know if they'd just been bad fits in the other places, or if both of those men realized they both were surly, if they both realized they needed to stop yelling at clients and if they wanted to keep on working in this business. Regardless of the reason, we came to love Doug. He was never happier than when he was at an audio desk with a band on the stage in front of him. That band knew that he wanted them to sound fantastic. He knew that he loved their music and wanted it to shine, and they appreciated him for it. And over the course of the several years that we worked together, I came to realize that he wanted me to shine as well. He took care of me, looked out for me. We had that kind of joy together that you can only have in a workplace, that particular kind of workplace humor and workplace camaraderie that comes of long days doing sometimes frustrating work. In 2007, he and I were working together on a premiere of a new show at the Culture. We did a lot of what I'll call experimental theater or experimental music. A lot of the jazz belonged to a genre that Doug called honk and squeak. So I'm very much persuaded that, personally, that it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. And I never quite warmed up to music that I couldn't tap my toe to. But there were people who loved it, and we did a lot in it there. And this was the sort of show that was going to take place that evening. All of these musical instruments on stage, hung from the ceiling, were several hundred white gloves of the sort that, an appraiser or like someone in restoration might wear so as to not put their fingerprints on a particularly important artifact or something like that. And Doug and I were in this big push to get ready for opening night. If you've ever tried to push to get ready for opening night, you know that rush where you're trying to get all of these notes done. Later that night was to be a lunar eclipse. And I was maybe 6:30 or 7 p.m. We were about to, the guests were already gathering in the lobby. We were about to open the doors. I was over stage right and Doug was over stage left. And I heard him call. I heard him shout. And I looked over and saw him fall. And I went and summoned help. And soon, just like earlier today, someone I'd never met before and I were doing CPR on Doug. Again, like today, the paramedics came quickly and they were great and compassionate. They said, "We're going to treat Doug like a brother." And I think they did. Doug had purchased new clothes to wear for the opening night, and off they came with the crash scissors. So he was left naked but for his underpants there on the stage. And for something like 45 minutes, the paramedics worked on him. And they would periodically, the lead paramedic would periodically give us an update. And the updates were not good. They were dire in nature. He said at first there's perhaps a 15% chance that Doug will walk out of the hospital just fine, and then it went down to 10 and then to 5. And eventually they placed the phone call to, I don't know where you place the phone call, to someone, to a doctor, and that was the signal to end CPR. And the lunar eclipse happened, and we passed from light into darkness, and darkness into light. Over the course of the evening, the bureaucracy of death did its work. The police came by to collect Doug's effects. I remember very vividly them taking a packet of cigarettes out of his pocket, and they said to us, when young guys like this peel over dead, we always find cigarettes in their pockets. And then eventually, I don't know, the coroner or whoever it is who comes and gets a body came to get him. And my colleagues and I were left by ourselves, and we sang songs, and we told stories about Doug. Perhaps the closest thing to a pirate that I have ever met. The story is a story of trauma or hardship or sorrow is perhaps obvious. What is harder to put into words is how beautiful it was. I'm not saying I wanted my friend to die. Of course I didn't. I wish he was still alive. And it was one of the great privileges of my life to be present with him in his dying. The closest analogy I can come up with for that experience was being present for the births of my children. In both the experience of birth and the experience of death, God is so close at hand. The Celts talk about thin places, and they mean by that these locations where if you could tear up the sod, you could reach down and touch God's face. The divine is so near. And Doug's death and subsequent deaths for which I have been present, and my children's births were thin experiences. God was so, so near in them. I had this deep understanding in those experiences that we are born out of love. We come from this home, and at the end of our lives, love or home is what we return to. I understood that Doug was home and that he was safe. The nativity story, if we strip away the sentimentality of it, and sentimentality to a point is okay. It's okay to love Christmas and love the traditions around it. But if we go back to the story, it's a story about the dangers, the out-of-controlness, the mess of life and death, and of birth in particular. There are so many hard and challenging and out-of-control things in this story. It begins with the unplanned pregnancy and Joseph very nearly leaving Mary. He only changes his mind after he's warned by God or called by God in a dream to remain with Mary. It continues with the family living with the arbitrary violence of empire, being forced to go register, and then after that, fleeing the violence of Herod. Remember the appalling story of the king ordering that all the small children be killed in the hopes that Jesus will be among them. And then there is birth itself, this messy, dangerous moment. I remember Phoebe saying around the births, my wife saying around the births of our children, that the realization that birth was, there's a certain point where like this is going to happen and there is nothing you can do to stop it. Death is much the same. I read an article recently that said that there are folks who are suspicious or reluctant or critical, I don't know what the word is, of pregnancy and birth because it impedes upon a person's autonomy. And I hope I can offer this critique without sounding too uncharitable. But I read that and I thought, oh gosh, if folks think that birth impedes upon your autonomy, wait till they hear about death. It turns out we're not autonomous. It turns out that we are here as a consequence of these gifts that we have received. And we're limited, and we can, for a while, have the illusion that we are under control. Some of us, if we're lucky, can string that illusion out over decades. But eventually, that illusion will fall away. There's a rabbi and a chaplain, I couldn't come up with the word for a second, their hospital chaplain, who says she often says to patients or the family of patients in the hospital is where you find out that you're not in control, because if you were in control, you wouldn't be here. And oh man, that is unwelcome and hard news. We all want to be in control. We all want to be autonomous, and experiences like this afternoon, experiences like Doug's death, experiences like birth, experiences like the phone call with the diagnosis, the big accident, who knows what you may be sitting with tonight. These are unwelcome announcements that We are not in control at all. It's into this mess, into this absence of control, this absence of autonomy, that God is born. This is the story of the incarnation. God going all in. God choosing to absolutely share in the joy and the sadness and the hardship and the pain of being alive. What an amazing statement of trust. How much does God trust humanity? That God is willing to be a baby and willing to share in all of the struggles and all of the wonder and all of the out-of-controlness of being alive. Jesus, over the course of his life, will experience all of the small and large hardships of this life. He will stub his toe. His gastrointestinal tract won't work the way that he wants it to. He will delight in food, in friends. He will suffer the worst kind of injustices. All of this mess that is being alive. This is Emmanuel, God with us. And I think this is good news. Good news in the out-of-controlness of this life, that God has chosen to share it with us. I'm grateful for that. Grateful for these glimpses of the holy that I got in Doug's dying, that I got in my children's births, that I got this afternoon helping a stranger, and I hope helping him back to health. Here we are on Christmas Eve, marking this baby named Jesus, who is God, and his entrance to join with us in the mess that is life. Thanks be to God for Emmanuel, God who shares with us in everything. Merry Christmas.